And all the right buttons in the right order. Oh no! Play some music, please, quick.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
But not that loud. Alright, here we go. Hey, Martin. Hey, Kathy and Chris. Hey, Timothy, Katie, hey, Sarah, hey, Rodney, Lisa, Ann, Kathleen, and Luann, Rodney, hey, everybody. Anybody I might have missed? Hey, Terry. Hey, Cindy in Detroit. Hey, Chris in Los Angeles. Morning, Susan. Hey, Deanna. Bridget and Mary Jo. Hey, Becky. Morning, everybody. The torrid clarinet purveying assorted rhythms, all danceable. This is Benny Goodman of the Congress Hotel here in Chicago. Hey, Heather. Hey, Dilla. Hey, Don. Morning, Karen and Daryl. It's a nice day outside. It's only about, temperatures in the high 50s. I can dig that. Hey, Laura. Hey, Angela. Hey, Gladys. Hey, Denny over on YouTube. Hey, Marla. Hey, Gladys and Deanne. Pour my tea. Now, Laura, today would have been very good weather for yesterday, for sure. Hey, Jordana. Hey, Deanne. Hey, Leah. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Nina and Emily. Hey, Harold on YouTube. Hey, Todd on Twitch. Morning, Kathleen. Hey, Kathy and Lori. Hey, Chris. And Joan. Things kind of pop up all at once on the Restream chat window. Oh. Hey, Sheila, yeehaw, back at you. Hey, Eileen and John and Marita. Hey, Bella. Hey, Pat. Thank you, Marita. Hey, Deanne. Yeah, I did a couple episodes of that show. Hey, Christine, Tracy, hey, Toby. Morning, Laura. Good morning all around. What's mysterious in Chicago today? Well, today we'll be talking about places like the Dews Mansion, which is more strange than mysterious. Well, we'll have the mysteries of Elias Purcell, the mystery of Clara Hark, the mystery of the Cardiff Giant, probably, the mystery of the haunted house on Lill. Hey, Jenny. Morning, Kathy and Marion. And then it's going to be a lean week or two, as I'm going to be out of town a lot. So the virtual tours will just be like, you'll be seeing me pop up in New York. Hey, Jeff.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Thank you, Denny. Hey, Kristen and Jean. Mary will be taking a school group around in New York. But as always, there will be downtime. Hey, Gail. Hey, Katie. I'm not sure where Miles is right now, but if it comes to the end of the tour and he hasn't made an appearance, my guess is he's hiding in that closet over there. Morning, Bob. But he's contractually obligated to show up at some point in the live stream. So if a couple of minutes after the main tour has ended he hasn't been hopping up on my back, then we'll see. Heather, I was working with the school group company. They send me all over the place. So to work in New York, you have to pass a test and get a license. So I passed it. The school group company sends me all over the place. Or they did. I haven't done it. I didn't do nearly as much this year as I did in previous years because I was occupied with the virtual tours. It's mostly school groups in New York, though I do a version of Grave Robbing 101 there as well. There's a lot of stories like these that I talk about in Chicago that are in New York but have been basically untapped. And yeah, I've never really done like a package tour like that for adults. There's a whole infrastructure involved in these things, with the buses and the hotels and the insurance. That's the big one. And I would have to start a whole new venture capital setup. Mandy does some tours for adults. He like takes senior groups down to the Museum of Walmart in Arkansas, which sounds kind of like Being Dead, only worse. Yeah, we could do like a Mysterian school tour where I'll like tape up your hotel room doors and get a security guard to make sure you don't sneak into each other's rooms. And so some people watch the tours on YouTube but have their comments windows up on their phone and Facebook. Yeah, we'll take all the Mysterians to Hard Rock Cafe and get them the limited group menu. You guys will love that. Mama Sabaro, we get a real New York pizza. Morning, Carol. You're welcome, Gene. Glad to have you, Stephanie. Oh, I'm sleepy today. I don't know why. I got a good night's sleep, as these things go. Eleanor, I try not to get, like, too much of a big head myself about getting somebody else a tombstone. I mean, he's the one who needed the headstone. But I'm glad he's got one. I'm glad it was so easy to do, too. Hey, Alex. Morning, Pam. Susan, if we're going on group meal stuff, no, there's not going to be a brownie volcano. They might bring you out a cookie at the end. Are there certain times of year that are more mysterious happenings or haunting activity? Everything kind of ebbs and flows in places like that. It's, I wouldn't really say so necessarily. Maybe more at the winter times, you're more predisposed to notice the weird things when it's dark. Just as likely to weird stuff is just as likely to happen in bright, sunny weather. But, you know, they always show them, like, even on, like, UFO shows on TV, they always show them poking around at night. Just because it looks better on television. Hey, Ann. Good morning, Mom.
And they all loved it. They all loved those passions when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same vein, Rosetta.
Hey, Tony. Alright, we'll let Benny Goodman play through another tune here before I get started on today's tour. There are a lot of group tours to Disney World out there, school marching bands and stuff. I've never run one of those myself. I know there's a lot of them out there. Now, for a tour guide, it's very dull work. Really, you just drop them off and say, okay, see you tonight. Hey, Kelly. But then you hang out at Disney World all day, so that's not so bad. I guess there is a Walmart near me now. It's like there's the one in Lincolnwood, but I haven't been inside one in years. They basically will not move into Chicago. Walmart expects a lot of tax breaks and a lot of grants from the city to build there. And Chicago won't play ball. Hey, Cindy. Hey, Angela. Let Benny Goodman finish out this tune before we get started. But good morning, everybody. Let's pour myself some more tea. In my Staffordshire Bracken replica mug. There was the Walmart in River North, but it was like the mini Walmarts, like the mini Targets that magically never have what you want. Same thing with the one on Lakeview and Broadway. It's the miniature, like, convenience store version. It's like the Target on Howard and, whatever. You know, those the neighborhood stores, they call them.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago.
Alright, I just nearly hit stop streaming when I meant to hit stop the music over here on the Benny window, because ladies and gentlemen, it's a couple of minutes after 10 o'clock. That's Benny Goodman wrapping up his tune, so it is time for us to start. Alright, welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I have been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out. I'm on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time, so I am incredibly famous, and you should definitely pay attention to anything that I say. Okay, amongst my books, just to establish my street cred here, Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, Murder Maps USA, brand new from Thames and Hudson, and, I thought I was going to be putting up a picture of the Graceland book right here. No, this is a young adult novel called Just Kill Me from a few years back. And also, the new book about Graceland Cemetery will be out from University of Illinois Press in just under 2 months now, just under 3 months. So, welcome along, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about strange tales from Lakeview and Lincoln Park. These are neighborhoods, a couple of neighborhoods above the Loop here in Chicago. Lincoln Park, if you go north of the Loop, first you come to River North, then you'll come to the Magnificent Mile area, Streeterville, then you're up in the Gold Coast, and, well, mostly the Gold Coast would be just next. You got the Magnificent Miles a little further east. But after the Gold Coast, you come into Lincoln Park, and then you come into Lakeview, which ends at about Wrigleyville. Though the neighborhood designations, the actual boundaries of these, vary a lot from realtor to realtor. Sometimes there's official boundaries, but nobody really pays attention to them. So we're going to start in the Lakeview, Lincoln Park general vicinity, just talking about a building that I used to take ghost tour groups into occasionally. They did tell me there was a guy that they thought was the ghost of a North Side mobster who would be leaning on the counter every now and then. Place probably was a North Side mob hangout. There were, it's just a couple of blocks away from the Biograph Theater. It's currently known as the Golden Dagger, but when I was taking groups there, it was known as the Tonic Room up on the 2700 block in North Halsted Street. Now, The building itself, we do know that it has an interesting story going back to at least the 1970s. Before that, it's a little bit trickier. It was a business called the Everleigh Club at one point, but not to be confused with the famous Everleigh Club, which of all of the houses of ill repute in Chicago was the one that had the best reputation. But in the 1970s, the building was home to an occult bookstore. If you wanted to find out about modern paganism and witchcraft, this was your place to go in Chicago. This article about it in the Tribune is really a pretty well-balanced article about neo-paganism, given that it's something from the 1970s. But also, there was a group meeting in the basement that was effectively a cult known as the Sabians. And from what we can see from the artwork down in the basement, they seem to be a mixture of a little bit of Aleister Crowley stuff, a little bit of ancient Egypt stuff, and just some pure BS, most likely. There's a lot of, I wish I had better pictures of down in the basement, but they've renamed the place the Golden Dagger now, largely because of what they found down in the basement. While they were digging out the basement to renovate, they found this dagger buried there. It had a skull head on it. It was, the blade was all rusted out to hell. And I guess they've got it, properly mounted and framed on the inside of the place now. But it used to be they just kind of kept it wrapped up in this towel behind the counter. Nobody was really sure what it could be for. There's different pagan traditions that had different ideas of what they might have done with it as some kind of a magic, some kind of a spell, possibly a love spell, possibly some kind of a revenge spell, possibly something completely different altogether. There was really nobody around from the 70s who still wanted to talk to us about it at the time. It was a really cool thing to see just walking into there. And we're going to move just across the street from here now, sticking around on Halsted Street. Just across is Halsted and Lill. You might know about Mr. Lill from my Rose Hill Cemetery tours. He's the guy who was involved in the biggest sex scandal of 1862. Mr. Lill ran the Lill Diversey Brewery. Diversey Street would be just a little bit further up from here. But this is a little building that is on Lill Street today. But back in 1894, there was this rickety frame building over here that was said to be haunted. Now, there was a bar operating on the place, run by a guy by the name of Chris Heim, who was a broom maker by trade. The rumor was that back in about the early 1880s, there had been an apartment in this place where a guy went nuts, murdered his two children in the attic, then dragged them down to the first floor. Now, stories about this place being haunted got popular enough that Chris Heim, the tavern owner, offered anyone $5 if they could spend an entire night in the attic. And people who tried never made it. They said they would wake up in the middle of the night hearing screams, and then look up and see a woman with glowing white eyes the size of saucers looking down at them holding a handful of burning sulfur. Now, the obvious solution here is that Chris Heim made the entire thing up. Digging through 1880s newspapers, I couldn't find anything about the murders being historical fact. And, it's fairly easy when you're operating a tavern. You get people properly drunk, then take them up there, have somebody dress up, and they'll be too drunk to realize that it's just that it was just old Mr. Parsons all along who ran the haunted amusement park and would have gotten away with it too because of all of the booze. However, the police at the time said that the stories had been going around since a long time before Chris Heim even moved into the place. Now, of course, it's a new building there now. It can be kind of tricky, Sometimes when people tear down a building and build a new one, the ghosts stop being reported. Other times they just stick around in the same building, so you never know. Haven't heard anything about a ghost showing up at this one in a long time. But it's mostly a private residence now, so unless people are really talking, we might never know. Let's move a little ways further up to the old Ivanhoe Theater. We'll just stop at this briefly. The old Ivanhoe Theater is now a Binny's Beverage Depot, but I always like to point this out because this is a theater where Tom Waits performed in the 1970s, back when he was singing about eggs and sausage and a side of toast and coffee and a roll and the guy having a bad liver and a broken heart. I just point this out because it is a scientific fact. I brook no disputes here. A scientific fact that liquor that you buy in a store where Tom Waits performed in the 1970s tastes better than the same bottle of liquor bought in any other location. We'll just pivot here just a little bit. Pivot away from the Binnies slightly. Now, if you go to the other side of this, it looks like just a regular storefront. Got the bookstore there. Books, rare, medium, and well done. And then we've got this apartment building. Now, this is the kind of place, if somebody walked by on a bus tour and told me, that place used to be a brothel, I'd be like, sure it is. It's the kind of thing they love telling about buildings that probably has no basis in fact. In this case, we know that it actually did happen to be true. Back in 1931, there was a young woman named Helen Diehl, pictured here over on the left, who was lured to Chicago from her home in Fort Wayne with the promise of a good job. It was one of those too good to be true situations. And it turned out the job was coming to this building to work as a masseuse. They had her living with a guy named Colantino, who was her boss. By day, they would send her here to work. After just a couple of weeks, he had had enough, came into Colantino's room, and said, "I want out, I've got a gun, and I'll shoot you." So Colantino just laughed and said, "Ha, I dare you to shoot me." That was the wrong thing to say, because she shot him in the neck and the shoulder, then tried to shoot herself as well, but made only a very superficial attempt at that. She was taken in for questioning. Colantino's sister was awfully mad, but she just, on the trial she said, "Well, I'm glad I didn't succeed in killing myself. Maybe life still holds a bit of pleasure for me yet." The coroner's jury found very quickly that she acted in self-defense. The police were absolutely furious about this. They wanted to throw her in jail and the whole works, but they figured out pretty quickly the coroner's jury understood her motives anyway. Whether it could actually be called self-defense is probably something a little bit different, because so much goes on, like what's going in your head at that 1 second. Initially, the papers reported that she had shot Colantino because she had found out that he had another girlfriend besides her. Turned out the story was quite a bit more complicated than that. There was a massage parlor where she was being forced to work in the Diversey Arms, right over here. And because of this, though, the cops were able to bust up the whole ring there. So something good came out of this anyway. What became of Helen Diehl after this, I don't really know. Helen Diehl was probably not her real name. That was the name that she was going by. You know, young people almost always went by different names, I find, in the 1920s and 30s. But when the reporters were asking her questions, she would say things like, "Oh, don't ask me what my real name is." So we still don't really know. But we'll move down, just down Roscoe Street a little bit from here, to the 661 Roscoe building that is still standing today, which in 1919 became the scene of one of Chicago's coolest unsolved mysteries. It's weird that this one isn't any better to remember than it was. There was a musician, a music master by the name of Elias Purcell. Came out of Duluth, Minnesota, a good place for music people to come out of. And then around 1919, he had moved to Chicago, and one day he was found dead and tied to a chair inside of this place. At first, they couldn't find any signs of violence. They couldn't find anything, any sign that anybody had hit him. There were no cuts on the body or anything, no sign of poisoning at first. And initially, they honestly said that maybe somebody scared him to death, or that he had willed his own heart to stop. But he had been tied up in his apartment. They ended up calling this the mystery of 1,000 clues. You can see the table in the dining room was set for 3, with a breakfast of 1 egg and 1 piece of toast divided into 3 parts each. Fingerprints on the dishes made by persons other than members of the Purcell family. Victim bound to a chair in careless manner, towel over face. Bundles neatly pinned together in various parts of the house. Broken glass on the floor. Kitchen door closed but the key left in. One theory here is that he had in fact somehow managed to kill himself, and eventually what they found out was that he had died of nicotine poisoning. Which is actually very easy if you buy pure nicotine, which was mainly used as a pesticide at the time, but so rarely that, every pharmacist who had sold any nicotine remembered it after this. But just a few drops of it is enough to kill you fairly quickly. But police made a big deal out of the fact that the place had been ransacked, and they said that and the breakfast table were just camouflage. That was everybody's favorite new word. This was 1919. World War I had just wrapped up. Camouflage was a word that came into public use during World War I. At this point, they were just using it in a sentence like a third grader with a new vocabulary word. They thought it was just a distraction. It was just camouflage. Now, it seems like the case would be that he had poisoned himself and tried to make it look like a murder. Putting a towel over his face with the nicotine to drip in, then tying himself up haphazardly, to making it look like a murder so his family could get the insurance money, which eventually they did. But then there are other clues to the contrary as well, such as the fingerprints on the glassware. However, the cops did such a bad job maintaining the crime scene, they and the reporters walked around and touched everything before anybody came around. But it was some interesting stuff. They were first having a think, can a man stop his own heart, then bind himself? I'm gonna say no. Then police Purcell slain with nicotine. The puzzle grows. Because they couldn't find an empty container of nicotine around the place either. There was no real way to trace the murder weapon. My own guess is it probably was a suicide, but the evidence was definitely inconclusive. And the insurance company did eventually pay out. So while we're up in the neighborhood here, let's go to see one of my favorite houses in the city, and one of my favorite stories in the city too, really. Over on Wrightwood, 503 Wrightwood, to be exact, stands the Dews Mansion, 1896 by the architects Cudell and Herx, who also did Cyrus McCormick's mansion, but we won't hold that against them. Work is work. This was originally built for Francis Dews, who was a brewer, currently owned by a property management firm. They've had it on sale for like $12 million for years, but they haven't had any takers, so they just kind of use it as an event venue sometimes. Now, after Mr. Dews died, we'll get some other shots of this here. After Mr. Dews died, it was bought by the Swedish Engineers Club, who owned it up until the 1970s. Now, as of the 1970s, it looked like this place was not going to find a new buyer. It was probably going to end up being sold to a developer who would tear it down to use the space. But then it was suddenly saved by a guy named George Santopietro, who was about 25 years old and planning to publish his own men's magazine called Coq, which is French for chicken. Get it? Of course you do. It's rather unsubtle, but he thought this was going to be a kind of a more working man's version of Playboy, but definitely he was trying to emulate Hugh Hefner a little bit. If you're going to start your own version of Playboy, you gotta have your own Playboy mansion. So he bought it for something like $73,000, put a lot of money into fixing it up, and actually made a lot of noise about how he was going to restore it to its former glory. And the press was just fascinated by this guy. They said, well, if you want to be working class, why a mansion? He said, well, hell, mansions are all right. I can understand wanting to live in a mansion. But don't quote me as saying hell. My mother would get mad. He started driving around town in a cream-colored Excalibur, a car that looked like this. Press was just fascinated with the guy. He was also talking about starting a sushi restaurant. If George Santopietro's dream comes true, it could make for an interesting reconditioning process for the American male. Identifying with Hugh Hefner, his bunnies, and his sports cars was no problem, but are we ready for raw fish? Now, Coke magazine only lasted a handful of issues. George Santopietro developed a reputation for borrowing money and not paying it back around town. There's a lot of like Inventing Anna type stories that circulate around the guy. He disappeared from Chicago in the late 70s, moved to Los Angeles where he did start a sushi restaurant, and made the news again starting in the 1980s when he married Vanna White. He and Vanna were married for a number of years. They're divorced now, and there was a bit of a mystery when I first put this together, is that a number of web pages about him mention that he also works as a camera technician, a dolly grip, on shows like The Mandalorian and The Good Place. And I had like a TikTok about this up saying, does anybody know if this is really the same George Santopietro? But then a Mysterian called some industry contacts and found out that's actually George Santopietro's son who is the dolly grip. And right after he said that, like the next day, George Santopietro himself hit me up on Twitter and said, other than that, you've got the story exactly right, but I'll call you sometime. Still waiting for that call from George Santopietro there. The house, after he owned it for a while, was owned by one of the members of the band Chicago co-owned it. Danny Sefferdine co-owned it with a mobbed-up nightclub owner / ward committeeman for a while. Let's go just up the road from there a bit. I know we all like a good ghost story, or a good ghostly murder mystery. In this apartment building in 1977, there was a woman living here by the name of Teresita Basa. Teresita Basa was a respiratory therapist living here at the Pine Grove Apartments. One day, firefighters were called to the place, found smoke coming out from underneath her door, and found her dead inside of the place. She had been stabbed to death. Now, initially they thought it was an assault case, but later it turned out that it was really probably a robbery case. She hadn't, other than the stabbing, she hadn't really been assaulted. The case was going cold for a little while, but then all of a sudden there was a woman named Remy Schwa who worked at the same hospital who started speaking in what sounded like Teresita's voice to her husband as though she had been possessed by the spirit of Teresita coming back to speak through her. In this voice, she named a hospital worker named Alan Showery and even said what kind of jewelry he was planning to steal. This became kind of a sensation. A possessed spirit named the murder suspect, and the court said. There's Teresita herself. And eventually, Alan Showery changed his plea to guilty, and this all became the subject of a book called A Voice from the Grave. I still see people online holding this up as proof that possession is real, proof of the afterlife. But they tend to exaggerate things. They tend to say that Teresita and Remy Schwa never would have known each other. She was saying things that she couldn't have possibly known. That's probably exaggerated. They worked different shifts, but they had been at the same parties together. They probably ended up on the same shift occasionally. The most likely scenario here is that Teresita happened to know something. She had overheard Alan Showery saying something, or somehow or another had figured out what had really happened and what the motive was. Then the best way that she could think of to bring this matter to the public was acting as though she had been possessed. Maybe it was actually a psychological thing. Maybe she thought that she was being possessed. But it's definitely not proof of the afterlife. It's just one of those weird stories. But I love weird stories. And just up the road from there, we'll talk just briefly about this architectural wonder, the Brewster Apartments, which love to claim that Charlie Chaplin used to live on the penthouse, despite all evidence to the contrary. They still claim that, no matter how many times I tell them it's not true. One person who did live there was a newspaper reporter went by Evelyn Campbell. She was most famous during the Johann Hawk case. She accompanied one of Hawk's victims to New York to identify him after he was captured, rode on the train with Johann Hawk all the way back, testified at his trial, then later on started writing a serial household romance that ran in newspapers for decades and decades. But she used to rent cars and go driving around Central Park and tell people, it just gives me some of the same thrill that I used to get back when I was Evelyn Campbell. Laura, did Capone live there? No, but I would be stunned if nobody said he did. Probably also, same thing, Johnny Weissmuller, the swimmer, is probably rumored to have been there at one point or another as well. I've often said, I believe that one day in about 1928, Al Capone, Charlie Chaplin, and Johnny Weissmuller just went around Chicago poking their heads into every building, probably doing like the Three Stooges, hello, 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 and then moved on to the next building so that they were, in fact, in all of them, therefore validating every Chicago urban legend. They probably took the tunnels from place to place. Let's move on down and just talk for a minute about one of our great local eccentrics, Parker R. Mason. Now, Parker R. Mason lived over here on this corner and was part of the whiskey ring. This was a thing in the 1870s where millions of dollars of whiskey taxes that was supposed to go to the government instead went into the pockets of government officials. He was known to threaten to kill anybody who got too close, but managed to use his money he had saved here to build himself a huge compound at Waveland and Pine Grove, but he mostly lived in the wooden annex next to the building, out back of which was, the mansion itself was just used as a laboratory. Word was that he was building himself a giant flying machine. There was all kinds of rumors around the neighborhood, like, what's he building in there? What the hell is he building in there? They thought it was a flying machine. It turned out to be really just a windmill that he was building for himself. But this is what the house looked like at the time. There was also a lot of talk at the time about outside of it there was this giant boulder that he initially wanted to have be his gravestone at Rose Hill Cemetery, though there's not a boulder or anything like this near his grave at Rose Hill. The rumor was that it was an asteroid that had fallen down from the sky. Really, it was taken from a quarry over near Ashland, over near Western Avenue someplace. Wanted it on his grave. It's not there. I don't know where the hell it is now. Unless it's like inside of one of the courtyards of these buildings, somewhere along the line that boulder just disappeared. Yeah, we all build windmills around here. It's just what we do. Let's check out this courtyard building over here. It's a little ways further north from all this. Is this courtyard building that at one point in the early 1930s was the hideout of the Barker Carpus gang, run by Doc Parker, though also said to be run by his mother, Ma Barker. Now, these guys had gotten involved in the early 30s. After liquor became legal again, suddenly bootlegging liquor just wasn't the lucrative gig that it was. So one thing that they tried to get into was kidnapping. So the Barker Carpus gang kidnapped the adult son of the owner of Schmidt Beer and held him ransom for $200,000, though just about every reporter who knew him and reported on this case says, why would anybody pay $200,000 to get that guy back? Nobody could really stand him. But the Schmidt family did pay up the money, but the Barker family found that they couldn't really spend it. The bills they suspected of being marked, so they just couldn't really do very much with it other than to hold on to it and just try to wait everything out. But after Babyface Nelson was killed in late 1934, Mr. Carpus of the Barker Carpus gang suddenly became public enemy number one. Now, the feds staked out this place, realized who was in there, and one snowy day they ran an ambush. Doc Barker came outside, slipped on some slush, and was captured. Another gang member was shot, and at that point the feds busted into the place. And there they found Byron Bolton, the guy that they had been looking for about 5 years for his rumored involvement in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. This was the famous case in 1929 when 7 members of the Bugs Moran gang were slain across the street in an apartment rumored to be a hideout for the lookouts who had been watching the gang walk into the garage where they were all eventually shot. They found an envelope with Byron Bolton's name on it. So they were looking for him for years. Turned out he was hiding out with the Barker Carpus gang. And as soon as he was arrested in connection with this, the Chicago Evening American ran a big story saying that Byron Bolton had confessed. He told him everything that he knew about the Chicago St. Valentine's Day massacre. And really, it turned out that he had not. Apparently he had been going around telling friends what had really happened for a while. The story the Evening American printed was basically what he had been telling his friends. So at the time he had not squealed, but later on he did. J. Edgar Hoover later got him talking. And the confession that he gave, the confession that's in the FBI file, broadly lines up with what the Evening American was saying. He said that the real killers were Fred Killer Burke and Fred Gates, who were a part of a group that have come to be known as the American Boys. They were a gang out of St. Louis. Every article about them now says that Capone called them the American Boys because they weren't specifically Italian or anything. Really, Capone considered himself American. He got mad if people called them Italian. One of their wives called them the American Boys. That's where it came from. They're still probably the most likely suspect for the actual shooters in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. But that clue all came from the raid on the Ma Barker gang. They had the feds kind of exaggerated Ma Barker's own role in the role, partly because they shot her to death, and it just looked like better PR if they acted like it had all been her the whole time. And of course, the massacre itself happened also up in the Lakeview, Lincoln Park area, over at the 2100 block of North Clark Street, where this little stretch of road now stands, next to the Clark Bar. Now, going into Lincoln Park itself, let's make our way on into Lincoln Park, past the grave observed of David Kennison, who said he was the last survivor of the Boston Tea Party, but is not actually buried right there and was not actually in the Boston Tea Party either. And we'll make our way up through Lincoln Park a little ways. There was a gangster who died here. Nails Morton, one of the early gangsters, was thrown off of a horse and killed. Two Gun Altery, another nearby gangster, purchased a gun for himself to go shoot the horse. But this was also about at the northern edge here of the Old City Cemetery. This is the petting zoo of the barn at the Lincoln Park Zoo. When they were putting up the foundation for this, they found at least one skeleton, coffin and everything, buried there. Lester Fisher, the zoo director at the time, called the coroner, and the coroner said, call the Department of Health. So he called the Department of Health, and they said, call the coroner. Went back and forth for a while until finally they decided to just put it back. Because we're on the grounds here of the Old City Cemetery. From the 1840s through the late 1850s, this is where pretty much everybody was buried. Efforts were made to move all of the bodies, but nobody has ever contended that they came even close to moving all of them. But in the midst of this, there was a quarry, a sculpture shop run by a guy named Edwin Burkhart. Now, Edwin Burkhart probably did most of the gravestones for the city cemetery. He was especially known for his angel sculptures. This is one moved from the old city cemetery to Graceland, might be one of his pieces of work, though they never signed these things, so it's impossible to know. But one day his quarry was visited by a couple of guys by the name of George Hull. And George Hull told him, I know this guy who swears that there used to be giants on Earth because of some line in the Bible. So here's what I'm thinking. I've got this giant block of gypsum. I would like you to carve it into a dead giant, and then we'll bury it for a couple of years, and then we'll dig it back up and fool him. I'll pay you huge money for this. And they agreed to do it, and he even stripped down naked to become the model for it. Like Stretch are like, now sculpt me, boys. Sculpt me like one of your French girls. I don't think they asked him to do that. They probably could have come up with a guy off without having a model to work off. But then he took it out to Cardiff, New York, buried it for a couple of years, and then hired some people to come dig a well and said, I want you to dig it right here, right on this very spot. Got a good feeling about this very spot. So they dug this up, and he announced they discovered it. They found proof that every word in the Bible was really true. There really were giants who walked the earth in those days. And there were definitely clergy who came out here and examined this thing and said, yes, it's true. This is proof of everything. And naturally, the thing became a giant tourist attraction. However, the guy made a mistake. Mr. Hull never actually paid the guys who did the sculpting, so they spilled the beans almost immediately. P.T. Barnum had offered a lot of money for this thing to put it on display himself, but then after it turned out to be a hoax, he just made his own. There's nothing illegal about making a hoax of a hoax. There is still a copy of it in Fort Dodge, Iowa to this day. The original is at a museum in Cooperstown. But you know, I can see, I probably should have had the fig leaf up over here. But I think you really can see the resemblance between him and Mr. Hull. See the face there? Move the giant down. I can see it. I remember my parents taking me through Fort Dodge to see the copy of it on the way up to Lake Okoboji one year. I'll move on to Addison Street. At 522 Addison is this cool courtyard apartment building. I think this one is especially cool. With that weird ninja chicken thing. So in 1925, there was a woman living in the one of the apartments toward the back by the name of Clara Hark, HRCQ. I'm never totally sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. But she was already married and divorced by the time she was 18 and was now living here with her new husband in 1925. Now, her mom and her stepfather, who was only a couple of years older than she was, lived up in Fox Lake, Wisconsin, and Clara would go up there to visit just about every weekend. But her mom apparently got furious over just about anything. If they were a minute late to dinner, there would be a huge fight. If Clara was out hanging out with her stepfather, who was about her age, she would get suspicious, and probably for good reasons. After one particularly big fight, Clara stormed out of the place in Fox Lake, and her version of the story is she then heard 4 gunshots. The police were called, and her mom, Lily, was found shot 4 times, including in the chest and the mouth. The gun was not present. It was over in another room. Clara's story changed a little bit. She said that they came in and she was still alive, so they quick grabbed the gun and threw it away so her mother couldn't shoot it anymore. But Clara was arrested for murder. People figured out right away that obviously her mother had not shot herself in the chest and then in the face. You really can't do that. But then they got a witness on trial who said, yes, it is possible to shoot your own solar plexus and still be able to fire more shots. Another witness said, no way you couldn't. But the court was able to raise reasonable doubt, and Clara was acquitted. Then divorced her new husband and then embarked on a whole life of noise complaints. She got into trouble over and over for lots of little things. In 1928, she was jailed for drunkenness during Prohibition, and was heard shouting in jail, if they think I'm sober, they've got another think coming. I'll make so much noise, they have to let me out. Moved around the Midwest, getting in trouble for most of her life until 1944 when she just disappeared from the news. But then 20 years later, in the 1970s, she started turning up again. She was living in Palm Beach, Florida, with several cats and railing against racist zoning boards. Died in 1983, having probably forgotten all about these 1920s cases, or at least her neighbors probably never knew about it. I wonder if they did. That'd be kind of neat if they did. Let's take a quick stroll down Alta Vista Terrace. So this is a miniature planned community, which is a landmark itself. The two sides of the street are interesting townhouses. No two are quite alike, except that they're mirror images of each other. Let's take a quick look at these. Just a quick stroll through the architecture. It's such a cool little street to walk down. Hard to find parking in order to do so. We'll kind of zip around backwards from here. You can see where the two sides meet at these houses. Some of them have been renovated a little bit since they were first built. This is an interesting little Dickensian block. Now we'll move just south of Wrigley Field a bit here. Let's take a quick sojourn up to the Hotel Carlos, which is now studio apartments, mostly studios. Used to be a hotel, where a lot of baseball players like to stay. Players who didn't live in Chicago. Among them, shortstop Billy Jurgis in 1932, who had been dating a woman named Violet Valley for a while. Violet was what was known as a baseball Annie. And even in the 1970s, it was not too unusual for two teams to be playing where each of their managers had once dated Violet Valley. But she became particularly infatuated with Billy Jurgis. And one day when he seemed to be breaking up with her, she came into the hotel room and shot him and herself. "It's odd, this being in love," she said. And Billy recovered quickly enough that he was able to start playing again pretty quickly. Decided not to press charges, just wanting the whole thing to go away and not be dragged through an entire court thing. Violet, for her part, is one of several people who use these front page headlines to get herself onto the vaudeville stage. This is 1932. We're in kind of the dying gasp of vaudeville at this point. But she did a show at the State Congress Theater called The Bear Cub Follies. Details of what was really going on in this screamingly funny burlesque production haven't really survived. There's just a couple of brief notices indicating that it was a really bad show. But some new stuff has been digitized since I last looked this story up. Maybe I can find a little bit more about it now. But alright, this was just kind of a quick one. But quick plug for the upcoming events. I'm going to be on the road quite a bit, so there's not too much coming up. But this Thursday night, the next full-length virtual tour will all be all about H.H. Holmes. That'll be on the Effing Chicago Facebook page. The Twitch and everything should still be the same. But over on Effing Chicago, we'll be doing the Effing edition. Effing is a collective of Chicago tour guides and historians behaving badly. We work without corporate restrictions. We'll dress how we want. We'll swear if we want. We'll rip on Donald Trump if we feel like it. And no corporate bosses telling us not to do it. Only ourselves to blame. So that'll be the next thing on Thursday night. Then Sunday through Thursday, I'll be on the road, so watch for things popping up in New York City. Weekend after I get back from that, I'm thinking a Prairie Avenue tour on one of those days. It's about time we brought that one back. Still putting together a schedule for June, but it all should be coming together very quickly now. Should you need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, t-shirt, hoodie, cafepress.com/Mysterious Chicago has got everything that you need. Flasks, shot glasses, thermoses, just regular old drinking glasses. Who actually has a meal without the Mysterious Chicago logo plastered over half of their flatware? Not me. But all right, everybody, with that, we will put the Benny Goodman back on and just hang out like we always do, right after I will go find Miles and some allergy spray. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you for that, Eleanor. Thanks, Steve. Good day, Laura. Thank you, Marion. Yeah, I'm gonna look into umbrellas. But really, if I can't make it like the one big logo, what are we even doing? Thanks, Dina. Thanks, Georgia and Susan. And of course, yeah, we'll be back tomorrow with Mural Monday. Thanks, Peter, on YouTube. Thanks, Gail. Hey, don't forget the PayPal and the Venmo are right up over here. Venmo being the preferred one, and Patreon. Also, Patreon is your best deal. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks, Lisa. I gotta see if I can figure out where Miles is. Miles is, you can see Priya is sleeping on the couch over here. See just a little bit of her. Let's see what we got here. Miles! You know where Miles is, Priya? I know you're not your brother's keeper. Miles, I'm betting you're in here. Am I correct in seeing that? Contract dictates he must make an appearance here. Yeah, he was in the closet. I think he wants to go back. Alright, well, careful. How'd you like this then, huh? Yawn. Well, your breath smells like cat food. Well, looking to put together some new tours next month. I just haven't had too much time lately. But I got footage for a couple more cemetery tours, the ones in New York and the ones in Savannah. Just have to do all the research to get them right.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rag, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune...
Okay, Miles, you can go back in the closet if you want to. Thanks, Eleanor. Now you want to come back, huh? Thanks, Betsy. Sorry about that, Aaron, but you know, as always, a couple of minutes after we stop, it'll be up on the videos page. Thanks, Jeff. Now he's going for the window. Want me to open the window, Miles? Let's open the window. There you go. I love windows. He loves an open window. Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Todd.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about her. Trucking.
I am ready for my nap, I tell you. Where did Priya go? Priya just got out. Oh, Priya just went and joined Miles in the window over here. See them right behind me. Oh, here. You guys want to show up a little bit? There you go. Kristen, same. Hard same. Aiden and I went and picked up some roasted chicken. Then we had a big lunch and then napped for a long time. All over town. Hey. Now this gives them a good vantage place for birds and squirrels. Plus people walking by with dogs. Oh. You can see all the patches from what they've done to this, poor chair. Got all around here, yeah.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
I asked Aiden what he was hungry for after the tour, and he said, "I've been thinking chicken with mac and cheese and mashed potatoes." I'm like, well, we both thought, well, the most obvious is KFC. And no, there's a Boston Market like a mile south of here. And then they forgot to put the chocolate cake that I ordered into the bag. I've had more trouble with drive-thrus lately. I'll go back and they gave me all the fries but none of the sandwiches. This time, by the time I found out, we were way, way away. Yeah, don't you guys look good together here? We were joking, it's like, well, maybe they have like some equivalent of we're getting for 3 people, let's just get like a bucket and a bunch of sides. But this is Boston Market. They don't have buckets. They don't have like take-home buckets. It would be like a valise of chicken. Not a family bucket, it would be a household valise of chicken. Hey, Amy. Those of you just joining us, the tour was at 10 o'clock Central, so now we're in the post-tour hangout portion. But in a couple of minutes, a couple of minutes after we stop broadcasting, it'll all be up on the videos page on Mysterious Chicago on the Facebook. Have a good day, Sue. Yeah, these cats get along very well. And about 5 a.m. they play a game called Horse Stampede, where they come barreling through the house chasing each other. It's amazing how much noise they make. Now I kind of want chicken again, but I'm still working my way through. You get a calzone at Villa Palermo, and it's going to last you about 4 meals.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago and dance some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
I'll let Benny do one more song. Aiden had never been to a Boston market. He knew about it as Mom and Grandmama used to work there years ago. But he thought it was like a grocery store. Like, you know, a market. And now that I think about it, Jewel would have been a good option, too. Carol, yep, Aiden has finished his freshman year at college. I'll be passing on the compliments people have been sending about his camera work yesterday. If it hollers, let it go, let it fly away. It's a saying high and low, hear it everywhere you go, any time of day. Valley sings it, Wiseman rings it, even Mr. Crosby sings it. Let it fly away. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a quick plug once again for what's coming up. And right now I'm going to be out of town, so it's going to be a little bit lighter than usual. But on Thursday night, we'll be doing H.H. Holmes. And then after that, I'm going to be on the road for a while, so just watch for some pop-up tours coming up. But in any case, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours, making sure you all stay safe, stay strong, and of course, everybody, stay spooky. Have a good day, everybody. Sherry, look up Camel Caravan, Benny Goodman, over on archive.org.